There's one technique that defines watercolor and sets it apart from every other medium: transparent layering. In this video, I'll show you the complete start to finish process so you can create luminous watercolor paintings with clarity, confidence, and ease. So what are we waiting for? Let's just jump right in. I'll just pull out a few watercolor supplies we need. I've got some watercolor paints, some clean water, and then of course some watercolor paper. I do have a simple flower sketch penciled on here, but if freehand painting is more your style, you can absolutely do this technique that way as well, just whatever you're comfortable with. I didn't have a specific flower in mind for today. I just wanted something soft and flowy. Now, if you do better with some type of an outline like me, then you can sketch this out yourself, or to save some time, I will have this outline in my Etsy shop so that all you have to do is simply print it out and trace it onto your watercolor paper using a light table or even just a well-lit window in your house, and you are all set to get right to the fun of painting. I'll be even setting this outline at a discounted price for 1 week because I really do want you to give this a try. I'll leave a link for my Etsy shop in the description of this video, along with information and links to any of the other products you see me using today. Then the last thing we need for this piece are, of course, some brushes. You can pull out whatever you happen to have on hand. I will be using some of my Craftamo brushes today. I'm not exactly sure which ones I need yet. Maybe let's pull out a big, medium, and small round brush. I've got here a number 10, a number 6, and a number 3 round. And just a little glimpse into the future, I didn't know it at the time, but I do end up pulling out the number 1 rigger brush later for some thin vein lines. I will also be leaving a link for these brushes in case you're interested in these as well. All right, enough of that. I'll just go ahead and quickly tape my paper down with some artist tape, and then we can get to painting. And one last thing I just remembered that I will throw out about the outline pencil drawing. Even though my Etsy outline shows some vein lines on the petals, I actually chose not to draw them on my flower that's on my watercolor paper just yet. I didn't want those pencil lines to stand out too much. That is something that we can sort of freehand in later with just some paint and brushes. Now for our colors today, you can paint this using whatever colors you like. This would look great in so many different hues. I'm kind of in the mood for something a little bit more soft, maybe a sort of plum color. I might just try pulling out a little bit of alizarin crimson here. And you know what? I have some ultramarine blue already on my tray from last week's painting. Maybe I'll try mixing these colors together. And if you do choose to mix colors, it is usually a good idea to test them out on a scrap piece of paper just to make sure it's how you like before you put it on the actual painting. Okay, I have a nice dark concentrated plum color, which will really create a nice contrast for my light versus dark transparent look. So using this number 6 round brush here, I'll just rinse out my brush pretty good, and then I'll use some of the slightly tainted water to paint on the base layer of one of these petals. There was actually a little bit of paint probably still in these bristles, but that's okay. Along with the extra water, this all just creates a really nice light valued color, and that is key. Just keep it nice and light. Now I'm actually just going to designate this number 6 round as my light base layer wash brush. So I'll just put that in my other hand here to hang on to just for a minute, and then I'll pull out my number 3 round brush and load it with some of that darker plum color paint. And now I'm just going to designate this brush to this paint color. Then using the tip of the brush here, I'm just going to take this darker paint and start painting a line of color around the edge of the still wet, lighter base layer of color. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that I hear people make with this technique is with this part, and I will tell you the key to making this work. You are going to want to be sure that you're painting this line of color so that it is touching both the wet side of the inside of the petal and at the same time touching the dry side of the paper. When the paint touches the wet side, it kind of spreads or softens just slightly, blending in just a little bit with that water that's already there. Sometimes people only have it touching that wet side though, and then it softens all of that color way too much, and you don't end up with the harder, more dark outer line of the paint. But when you can balance this just right and also paint the line of color so that it's touching a little bit of the dry paper as well, this is going to create a more defined line on the outside and then a softer blended line on the inside. This can be a tricky balance to get the hang of, but I'm telling you, this can be a make or a break for this technique. And once as you get the hang of it, you can easily whip out these types of paintings. They are so beautiful and really are so much fun to do. Another thing I'm just going to point out, you may notice also that if I ever lift up on the brush, there's a tendency for the paint to drop a little bit more or spread or have extra bits of color, which can really actually add some fun effects and interest to the petals. If I paint the line straight through without letting up on the brush, it's a pretty straight, clean line of color. So just keep that in mind and use that to your advantage. I actually really like a few extra added color bits here and there. It kind of creates a natural, roughly look sort of edge. I particularly like this extra color to be on the outer end or point of the petals, as well as the innermost part closest to the stem of the flower. You may have noticed just a little bit ago that I pulled out that thin #1 rigger brush to use for some thin vein lines on the petals. Now, because the background layer of the paint is still a little bit wet, some of the vein lines may blur or soften, and that's okay. It kind of just gives a hint or suggestion of the lines in there. If we need to, we can always go back in later when it's dry and add some more defined lines. Now at this point, you'll see I'm just going to work my way around the flower head, skipping about every other petal or so that might be touching each other for now. We don't want these to blend together or we're going to lose that nice crisp edge that we just created. But I'll just go ahead and continue on with this first layer of petals. I hope you're enjoying the tutorial so far. This is such a fun technique and is something that is so special and unique to watercolors. In fact, it's one of my favorite things to do with watercolors. So hopefully this is going to help you create your own transparent flowers. If you like my painting and teaching style today, I do hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss out on any of my new and upcoming tutorials. All right, I think this first petal that I painted is probably dry enough so I can paint this next petal in that's kind of sharing an edge with it. So let's give that a try. Okay, my friends, well done. We've got our first layer of petals all finished. Now, this is very important. Before we start the second layer of overlapping petals, it is key to make sure that all of these are dry before we do that. So take a quick break, get something to eat or drink, or just stretch your legs for a minute, or you can even just speed up the process and use a hairdryer. But here I am back again just a few minutes later. I'll just freshen up my paint a little bit, and I think my painting is pretty much dry at this point, so I'm going to go ahead and start painting in the next layer of petals. The good news is that we are going to be just using the exact same technique that we've already been doing. Now, There is one more thing that I do need to point out that sometimes causes people some struggle with this technique. Sometimes the brand of paint that you use may have a more lifting or a reactivating quality to it. So as you start to paint the water layer here that overlaps the first layer of petals, sometimes that water can reactivate or soften the paint or the hard lines that we worked so hard to create, which can be frustrating. The paints that I'm using today are M. Graham and Company, which tend to not reactivate as easily, which can be good and can be bad sometimes, especially if I make a mistake. But for this technique, they are golden. I've never had trouble keeping the lines fairly crisp as I begin layering. I also take care not to work it too hard. My initial layer of water is put on here pretty quickly, and I try really hard not to scrub at it too much, and this also helps prevent that softening or the reactivating too. All right, well done. This turned out so pretty. It's lovely, soft, and flowy. Now, some of these petals are a little bit more dry at this point, so I might take that rigger brush and paint in a few more vein lines in here and there just to be a little bit more defined, but be careful not to paint them in too thick or have too many of them. We don't want to detract from the flower itself, and a few of these vein lines can really go a long way. Okay, while we let all of that finish drying, let's go ahead and get a color ready for the stem. Now, I thought about doing a dark or a sort of dull green, but I'm actually going to do something a little bit unconventional instead. Maybe it's not going to look good. Maybe it will. I don't know. We're going to try it and find out. I just have a little bit of ivory black here on my tray already, so I'm going to freshen that up a little bit. And then I'm going to add in some of our plum purple mixture into this to sort of tie these two colors together. Now, using the number 3 round, I'll paint this stem in pretty much the same way as I did the petals, starting with a very light layer of tainted water along the area first. And then just like before, I'll take some of that purplish gray color that we mixed up and add that along the sides and continue on with this transparent look. I'll probably be a little bit more heavy in this color right at the top of the stem here, just so that the flower petals look a little bit more grounded to something, but then I will get more transparent as I go down. Okay, great job. Now, you could actually leave this flower just as it is and call it done if you want to. I felt like it would kind of finish it off a little bit to have a stamen in here though. Nothing too crazy. I'm just going to take that gray color that we already used on the stem. I'll paint in some darker top areas using the rigger brush, and then I'll just paint in some very thin lines connecting the tops to the center area of the flower. Just a very simple thing, but I do kind of think it finishes it off. And that, my friends, is it. This all might just take a minute to get the hang of, but just keep practicing, trust each layer, and you are going to be amazed at how naturally your paintings will begin to glow. I hope you had some fun today and maybe even learned something new. If you did enjoy this tutorial, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.